It was a normal evening until my phone buzzed. I had been in a long relationship with Lucas, age 32 male, and though things seemed perfect on the surface, something about him had felt off lately. Maybe it was the late nights at work, the constant absence, or the secretive behavior that I had started to notice. I tried to ignore the little red flags, convincing myself I was just being paranoid. But tonight, as I reached for my phone, a message notification caught my eye. "I don't think he'll ever find out." That sentence was all it took. My heart sank. I opened the message, only to see a photo of Lucas, smiling with someone I didn't recognize, her hand placed intimately on his chest. I froze, the room spinning as everything I thought I knew about my relationship came crashing down. The room felt smaller as the air thickened with the weight of what I had just discovered. I stood there motionless for a moment, trying to breathe through the wave of nausea and betrayal that consumed me. Why her? I thought. The woman in the photo, I didn't know her. And what bothered me even more was Lucas' expression, so carefree, so familiar with her. I walked to the kitchen and poured myself a drink, hoping it would steady my hands. But all I could think about was the moment I would have to confront him. How did I let this happen? The guilt gnawed at me. But I knew one thing for sure. I was done playing the fool. I would make him pay for this. Not for revenge, not for petty satisfaction, but because I deserved the truth. And I would stop at nothing to get it. Later that evening, Lucas walked in through the front door, his usual charming smile plastered on his face. But today that smile didn't reach me. I stood in the hallway, arms crossed, waiting for him. The sound of his footsteps grew louder, and as he rounded the corner, our eyes met. For a moment, time stood still. Then I spoke, my voice colder than I had ever heard it. "So, when were you going to tell me about her?" I asked, not bothering to hide the bitterness in my voice. Lucas froze, his face going pale, as he slowly realized I knew. I don't know what you're talking about," he stammered. But I wasn't having it. "The woman in the picture, Lucas, don't play dumb, I saw it all." His face drained of color, and I could see the panic in his eyes. This was it. The moment of reckoning. Lucas tried to speak, but no words came out. The guilt was written all over his face, and I could see him struggling to come up with an excuse. "You were working late, right?" I taunted, my voice dripping with sarcasm. He opened his mouth but stopped himself, clearly caught. I was just, "Don't lie to me," I snapped. "I saw the photo, Lucas. I saw you with her. And now, you're going to stand here and tell me nothing happened?" Lucas's eyes darted around as if searching for a way out, but there was none. The truth hung in the air, thick and suffocating. He finally spoke, his voice breaking. "It's not what you think, William." But I was done listening to his excuses. "I can't believe you did this to me," I said, my voice steady but cold. "You've been lying to me for who knows how long? And now you want me to believe this isn't what it looks like?" Lucas's face twisted in desperation, and for a second I almost felt pity for him. But then I remembered the betrayal, the lies, the woman in the picture. "I'm done, Lucas," I whispered. "You've broken my trust and I won't stand for it." His face fell as he reached out to touch my arm, but I pulled away. "Don't touch me," I said, my voice firm. "It's over." And with those words, I walked away, leaving Lucas standing in the hallway, a broken man. The next few days felt like an emotional blur. After confronting Lucas, I couldn't bring myself to stay in the apartment. Every corner felt like a reminder of the lies he had told. I moved into a friend's place, trying to find solace in the silence. But it was impossible to escape the thoughts of him, the betrayal, the image of his smile with another woman. I knew I needed answers. I wasn't going to just let this go. As I sat on the couch, scrolling through my phone aimlessly, a text from Lucas popped up. "We need to talk. I'm sorry for everything. Please don't leave me." I stared at the message, my heart racing with anger and confusion. Talk? What could he possibly say now? But I knew that this wasn't over. I had made up my mind. I was going to get my revenge, and I wasn't going to make it easy for him. I knew I had to confront him again, but this time, it wasn't going to be about asking for explanations. This time, I wanted him to feel the pain he had caused. I met with Lucas at a cafe the next day. When he saw me, his face brightened with a false sense of hope, but I wasn't fooled. "I'm sorry, William," he said, his voice almost pleading. "I didn't mean for any of this to happen." His words were hollow, just another attempt at getting me to forgive him. But I wasn't interested in hearing his excuses anymore. "You've been lying to me for months," I said, my voice cold and distant. "And now, you want me to just forgive you?" I leaned in, meeting his gaze with intensity. "I don't think so, Lucas. You're going to regret what you did." As the conversation continued, I realized that no matter how many times he apologized, nothing would ever be the same. Lucas tried to justify his actions, claiming that it was a mistake, that he never intended to hurt me. But I saw through the lies. "It's not a mistake, Lucas," I said, my voice firm. "You knew exactly what you were doing. You didn't just make a mistake, you betrayed me. You chose her over me." His face crumpled with shame, and for a brief moment, I thought I saw a glimpse of the man I once loved. But the anger inside me was too much to ignore. "I don't want your apologies," I said, standing up from the table. "I want you to understand the pain you've caused. I want you to feel what it's like to be betrayed." I left him sitting there, his words choking in his throat as I walked away. Later that night, I sat alone in my friend's apartment, the sound of the city drifting through the window. I replayed the conversation with Lucas over and over in my mind. I knew what I had to do now, but it wasn't going to be easy. I wasn't just going to confront him again. I was going to make him feel the consequences of his actions. I had an idea. It wasn't a petty revenge. It wasn't about humiliating him or getting back at him in a childish way. It was about showing him what it felt like to lose everything. I picked up my phone, sent a quick message to a friend, and made the plan. I would make sure he regretted the day he decided to betray me. This was no longer about love or forgiveness. This was about justice. The following day, I put my plan into motion. I contacted a few people who could help me get what I needed, a piece of Lucas's life that he had carefully hidden. It wasn't about embarrassing him. It wasn't about physical confrontation. No, I was going to destroy the very thing that he held dear, his image. I started spreading small, subtle rumors about his involvement with someone else. I knew exactly where to plant the seeds. I used social media to my advantage, carefully crafting stories that painted him in the worst light. The truth would come out, not through confrontation, but through his own destruction. As I watched the chaos unfold from the sidelines, I felt a sense of control wash over me. This was my revenge, and it was just beginning. The days after I set my plan into motion felt strangely satisfying. Lucas had no idea what was coming, but I could see the cracks forming. He was getting anxious, checking his phone more than usual, and I knew that somewhere he was starting to feel the pressure. The rumors I had spread were beginning to take effect. People were talking, and they were starting to question his loyalty. The perfect image he had worked so hard to maintain was beginning to crumble, and I felt a sense of justice. But despite the satisfaction, something in me couldn't ignore the void. I still loved him, or at least I thought I did. But how could I love someone who had betrayed me so completely? "No," I reminded myself, "this is for the best." As I stood in front of the mirror, looking at myself, I couldn't help but wonder what I had become. Was I seeking revenge for justice, or to fill the emptiness inside me? Lucas finally reached out to me. I hadn't heard from him in days, and when his call came through, my heart skipped a beat. I knew this was the moment where everything would come to a head. I answered the phone, my voice cold. "What do you want, Lucas?" His voice came through the line, shaky and desperate. "Please, William, we need to talk. I know what's happening, and I swear I can explain everything." His words were pleading, but I wasn't interested in his excuses anymore. "Explain?" I repeated, bitterness lacing my voice. "You had your chance to explain. Now, it's too late. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I'm sorry, he whispered. I never wanted to hurt you. I let the silence hang for a moment before responding. You already have. And with that, I hung up the phone, leaving him with nothing but the weight of his betrayal. After the call, I felt a strange sense of finality wash over me. I had made my decision, and there was no going back. The next morning, I woke up with a singular focus. I needed to make sure that Lucas understood the consequences of his actions. I couldn't let him think that everything would just go back to normal. I made a few more calls, gathering the final pieces of my plan. It was time to turn up the heat. I arranged for a meeting with some of his closest friends, people who didn't know about his affair. I would let them in on the truth, and I would make sure they knew exactly what kind of person Lucas really was. It wasn't just about the affair anymore. It was about showing him that his actions had far-reaching consequences. The day of the meeting arrived, and Lucas had no idea what was coming. I sat in the cafe, watching as his friends trickled in, oblivious to what I had in store for them. As they settled around the table, I couldn't help but feel a surge of satisfaction. When Lucas arrived, he looked confused, seeing all of his friends gathered, but before he could say anything, I stood up. I think it's time you all knew the truth about Lucas, I said, my voice steady and unwavering. The room fell silent, and all eyes turned to me. Lucas has been seeing someone else, I continued, my gaze locked onto him. And not just anyone. Someone close to all of us. The silence in the room was deafening. I could see the shock on their faces as they processed my words. I had no intention of letting Lucas escape this. The truth was out, and there was no going back. The fallout was immediate. Lucas's friends were angry, hurt, and betrayed, just as I had been. As they confronted him, I could see the panic in his eyes. He tried to explain, but there was no saving himself. The lies had piled up too high, and he had no way out. I sat back and watched as his world crumbled. But as I did, something inside me started to shift. Watching him face the consequences of his actions was satisfying, yes, but it didn't heal the pain he had caused me. It didn't fix the broken trust, the shattered love. The revenge wasn't as sweet as I had imagined. When it was over, I stood up and left the cafe without saying a word. I wasn't doing this for closure anymore. I was doing it because I had to. But the truth was, I wasn't sure if I would ever feel whole again. After the cafe confrontation, things changed. Lucas tried to reach out, sending me messages, calling, and even showing up at my friend's apartment, but I ignored him. The satisfaction I had felt earlier slowly faded, replaced by something darker. I didn't want to see him, but a part of me couldn't shake the thought of what he had done to me. I still loved him, even if I hated myself for it. He had broken me, and I wasn't sure if I could ever fully recover. Yet, the power I now had felt strangely empowering. I could feel the control slipping through my fingers every time I thought of him, but I didn't want to give in to it. I kept my distance, but I knew deep down that I wasn't done with him yet. I wasn't ready to let go. A week passed, and Lucas still wasn't giving up. His persistence was exhausting, but there was something almost pathetic about it now. One evening, as I was coming home from work, I saw him standing outside my apartment building, waiting. He looked tired, disheveled, different from the man I had once known. His usual confidence was gone, replaced by desperation. "William, please, we need to talk," he said, his voice breaking. I stood in the doorway, arms crossed, unmoving. "You've had your chances, Lucas," I replied, my voice firm. "I gave you everything, and you destroyed it. What's left to talk about?" He looked at me, pain written all over his face. "I know I messed up. I'm sorry for everything, but I need you to know I never wanted to hurt you." The sincerity in his eyes almost made me waver. But then I remembered the betrayal, the lies. "You already did," I said quietly, shutting the door behind me. Days passed, and I tried to move on. I kept busy, work, friends, anything to keep my mind off Lucas. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't escape the feeling that something was missing. The anger that had driven my actions before was starting to turn inward. I had taken my revenge, but it hadn't given me what I truly needed: closure. I didn't feel satisfied. I didn't feel better. In fact, it only seemed to make everything worse. Every time I saw something that reminded me of Lucas, the old feelings resurfaced: guilt, sadness, longing. I wasn't sure what I was looking for anymore. I thought revenge would make me stronger, but now I was starting to realize it had just left me broken, without the ability to heal. Maybe I had been so focused on making him feel my pain that I had forgotten to take care of myself. One night, after a few drinks, I found myself standing outside Lucas' apartment building, staring up at his window. I hadn't planned to be here, but something pulled me toward him. I told myself I was just getting closure. I told myself I needed to know if there was any part of him left that cared about me. When I rang the doorbell, my heart was pounding in my chest. The door opened, and there he was, looking more tired than I had ever seen him. He hesitated when he saw me, but then stepped aside. "William, what are you doing here?" he asked, his voice hoarse. I couldn't find the words right away. "I don't know," I whispered. "I thought maybe I could see you one last time." His expression softened, and for a moment, it felt like we were back in the time before everything went wrong. But I quickly reminded myself, this wasn't about us anymore. It was about what I needed to do for myself. We stood in the doorway for what felt like an eternity, neither of us saying anything. Finally, Lucas spoke, his voice low. "I'm sorry for everything, William. I messed up. And I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I wish you could find it in you to give me one more chance." I stood there, my heart heavy in my chest. A part of me wanted to reach out, to tell him that I forgave him, but I knew I couldn't. "Not yet. I can't forgive you, Lucas," I said quietly. "I don't even know if I ever will. But I need you to understand that you broke something in me, and I need to heal before I can move forward." He nodded slowly, tears welling in his eyes. "I understand, and I'll never stop being sorry." With that, I turned and walked away, leaving him standing in the doorway. I didn't look back. I knew it was the right choice, even if it hurt. Weeks went by, and life slowly began to feel normal again. I focused on my work, spent time with friends, and did my best to leave the past behind. But even in the quiet moments, I couldn't escape the echo of Lucas's face, his words, and the betrayal. I tried to move on, but something still lingered inside me. I had been so angry for so long, and now, with that anger fading, I found myself empty, like a part of me was still missing. It wasn't until I ran into someone from my past, Sophie, an old friend who had always been there, that I realized something needed to change. She saw right through my facade. "You're not okay, are you?" she asked, her voice gentle but firm. I didn't want to admit it, but I couldn't lie to her. "I'm not sure who I am anymore," I confessed. Sophie gave me a knowing look. "Then it's time to find out." Her words were a turning point. I realized that I couldn't keep living in the past. It was time for me to focus on healing, and maybe, just maybe, I could rebuild myself from the ground up. Sophie's advice to focus on myself wasn't easy to take. I had been so consumed by my need for revenge, my desire to make Lucas pay, that I had forgotten what it meant to be happy on my own. The truth was, I had been relying on the wrong things, on the idea that vengeance would fill the void inside me. But vengeance was hollow, and it had only left me more broken. Over the next few days, I started taking small steps toward healing. I reconnected with old hobbies, spent more time with my family, and allowed myself to feel joy again. It was difficult, and sometimes the pain would creep back in, but I was learning how to live with it, rather than letting it control me. One evening, as I was walking home, I felt the familiar pang of loneliness, but this time I didn't feel the urge to reach for my phone or check for messages from Lucas. I simply took a deep breath and moved forward. For the first time in a while, I felt like I was gaining control of my own life again. A month later, I bumped into Lucas again. This time, it wasn't by chance. He had reached out and asked if we could meet. I was hesitant at first, unsure if I was ready to face him again. But after all the time that had passed, I realized that I wasn't the same person anymore. I had moved on, and this was just another part of my healing process. When we met, he looked different, more humbled, quieter, like the arrogance had drained out of him. "William," he said softly, his voice almost unrecognizable from the one I had known. "I just wanted to apologize again. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I hope you know that I regret everything." I could hear the sincerity in his voice, but I wasn't the same person who would fall for his charm anymore. "Lucas," I said, my voice calm, "I'm not angry with you anymore. I've learned that I don't need your apology to move on. I've forgiven myself for letting this happen." It was the first time in months that I felt truly free. I didn't need closure from him. I had already found it within myself. After that meeting, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. It was as though I had finally closed that chapter of my life. But there was something else. A new realization. I didn't need to rely on the past to define me. I had my own strength now, and that was something Lucas could never take away. I had rebuilt myself from the ground up, and it wasn't about revenge or validation. It was about self-empowerment. I spent the next few months working on myself, diving into passions that I had put aside for too long. I focused on my career, deepened friendships that had been neglected, and learned to love my own company. Slowly but surely, the pain faded into something manageable, something I could live with. It wasn't easy, but it was worth it. I had learned to trust myself again, and that was all I really needed. A year later, I saw Lucas again, this time by chance at a mutual friend's party. He had changed, but so had I. We exchanged pleasantries, and though there was no animosity between us, it was clear that the past was in the past. The anger, the betrayal, it was all gone, replaced by a quiet understanding that we were both better off moving on. As we spoke briefly, I realized that I no longer felt the need to prove anything to him or to anyone else. I had already proved everything to myself. As I walked away from the conversation, I felt at peace. The past no longer had power over me, and I had finally found the strength to let it go. Lucas had become just another chapter in my story, and I was ready for the next one. The months after I let go of Lucas were some of the best I had ever had. I finally felt free, as though I could breathe again without the weight of betrayal hanging over me. My work flourished, I reconnected with old friends, and I even started dating again. But the journey wasn't without its challenges. Trusting someone new felt like an impossible task. The fear of being hurt again lingered in the back of my mind. One evening, as I sat in a cozy bar with a friend, talking about the past, I found myself reflecting on how far I had come. "You've come a long way, William," Sophie said, raising her glass. "I'm proud of you." I smiled, the warmth of her words settling over me. "Thanks, Sophie," I replied. "I think I'm finally starting to heal." But even as I said the words, a part of me wondered if I would ever fully let go of the scars Lucas had left behind. As time passed, I found myself opening up more to the possibility of love again. I started dating casually, enjoying the company of someone new, but I couldn't help but compare every little thing to what I had with Lucas. The fear of being vulnerable again crept in, and it was hard to shake off the feeling that I would end up hurt once more. The new relationship wasn't moving fast, but it felt comfortable. Then one evening, while out on a date, I received a message that made my heart drop. It was from Lucas. "I've been thinking a lot about us, and I realize now that I never truly understood what I had with you. I'm sorry for everything, and I hope one day we can talk. I'll always care about you." Reading those words took me back to a time I had worked so hard to forget. I felt the weight of everything come rushing back, but instead of responding, I put the phone down and took a deep breath. I wasn't the same person who would be dragged back into his world. I had moved on, and I wasn't going back. Later that night, I sat alone in my apartment, the message from Lucas still fresh in my mind. It was hard to ignore the part of me that still cared for him, but I knew deep down that I was stronger than this. I had spent so long trying to prove something to him, but now, I was proving something to myself. I had been a fool to allow someone else's actions to define me, and I wasn't going to let that happen again. The next morning, I called the woman I had been seeing. "I think we need to talk," I said, my voice steady. She agreed to meet later that afternoon. I wasn't sure what I wanted from the conversation, but I knew I had to be honest about where I stood. I couldn't keep pretending everything was perfect when there were still parts of me that needed healing. I owed it to both of us to be clear about my feelings. When I met with her later that day, I could see the confusion in her eyes as I explained my feelings. "I like you," I said, "but I'm not sure if I'm ready for something serious. There's still too much from my past that I need to work through. I don't want to hurt you." She listened quietly, her expression softening as she took in my words. "I appreciate your honesty, William," she said after a long pause. "I think you're right. You need to take care of yourself first, and I respect that." As we parted ways, I felt a sense of relief. For the first time in a long while, I wasn't carrying the weight of someone else's expectations. I was free to heal on my own terms. It was a difficult decision, but it was the right one. I wasn't ready for a new relationship, but I was ready to focus on me. Months passed, and I continued to focus on my personal growth. I started a new project at work, met new people, and spent more time reconnecting with family. Slowly, the pain of my past began to fade. I realized that I didn't need to rely on anyone to make me feel whole. I had spent so much time thinking I needed someone else to make me feel validated, but I had learned that true fulfillment came from within. One evening, as I sat on my balcony watching the sunset, I thought about Lucas. I realized that I no longer harbored anger or resentment toward him. I had forgiven him, not for him, but for me. Forgiveness wasn't about absolving him of his wrongdoings. It was about letting go of the hold they had on me. The weight had lifted. I was free. And as I sat there, the sun setting behind the horizon, I smiled, knowing that I was ready to face whatever the future held. A year had passed since I made the decision to walk away from Lucas, and my life had transformed in ways I hadn't imagined. I had found my footing again, rediscovered my passions, and most importantly, I had learned to love myself. I'd met someone new, a woman named Emma, age 29, female, blonde, wearing a floral dress. She was kind, patient, and understanding. She didn't push me to open up before I was ready. As we spent more time together, I realized that love didn't have to come with the baggage and betrayal I had once experienced. It was possible to trust again, to feel safe in the arms of someone who respected my boundaries. One evening, as we were walking through the park, Emma stopped and turned to me. "William," she said softly, "I know you've been through a lot, but I want you to know that I'm here for you, no matter what." Those words were all I needed to hear. For the first time in years, I felt like I was ready for love again, without fear or hesitation. The more I spent time with Emma, the more I realized just how much I had healed. She didn't try to replace anyone from my past. She simply showed me that love could be simple and beautiful, without the weight of expectation. One afternoon, we sat at a cafe, talking about everything and nothing. As we laughed over a cup of coffee, I realized how much lighter I felt. "You know," I said, my voice filled with a calm certainty, "I never thought I could feel this way again. After everything that happened with Lucas, I didn't think I'd ever trust anyone the way I trusted him." Emma smiled gently. "And now you trust me?" she asked. I nodded, my gaze steady. "I do. It's taken time, but I'm ready for this, for us." Emma's smile widened, and for the first time in a long while I truly believed in the possibility of happiness. One evening, as Emma and I sat watching the stars on the rooftop of my apartment building, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't known in years. "You've changed," she said softly, leaning her head on my shoulder. "For the better." I smiled, my heart full. "I have," I replied. "I've learned that healing isn't something you can rush. It takes time, and you can't do it alone." I paused for a moment, letting the stillness of the night wash over me. "But I'm grateful for the journey, even the painful parts. They taught me who I really am." Emma squeezed my hand and we sat in comfortable silence, the city lights shimmering below us. I had finally found peace within myself, and with Emma by my side, I felt ready to face whatever the future had in store. As time went on, Lucas' presence in my life faded more and more. I hadn't heard from him in months, and I had no desire to. The man I once loved was gone, replaced by the person I had become. One afternoon, as I was going through some old things, I found a box of mementos from my relationship with Lucas, photos, letters, trinkets. I sat there for a long while, just staring at them. A part of me wanted to throw everything away, to erase the memories, but another part of me knew that I needed to let them go on my own terms. With a deep breath, I packed the box away and placed it in the back of the closet. I didn't need it to remind me of the pain anymore. The chapter was closed, and I was ready to move forward. The final step of my healing journey was forgiveness, not for Lucas but for myself. I had spent so long blaming myself for his betrayal, but I had to realize that I wasn't responsible for his actions. I had given him everything, and it wasn't my fault that he chose to betray me. As I stood in front of the mirror one last time, I saw a man who had rebuilt his life from the ground up. I had learned that the past didn't define me. It was the choices I made now that would shape my future. I was ready to let go of the past completely and embrace the present. I smiled at my reflection, knowing that I had finally found the peace I had been searching for. "I'm ready," I whispered to myself. And for the first time in years, I truly meant it.